Good evening. My name is Jim Kello. Welcome to New Tracks Meetup. This is a place where mentors help modelers build. Thanks so much for coming this evening. Hope you come back often and tell your friends about us. If you're new to the show, please register at our website, newtracksmodeling.com. And don't forget to confirm your registration by replying to the email that you will receive. To make sure your friends can attend, please forward them the email that you get announcing the login link for each one of our shows so that they can attend too. As I've said before, we need a lot of help producing our shows. We've got all kinds of jobs that are needed. And Phil Edholm has volunteered to try to help us in this regard somewhat by dealing with the kinds of positions. And Dan Doherty has volunteered to break these up in plain English, where everybody can understand what's involved. And if you can help us in any way, we would appreciate it. We're going to be sending out an email to everybody who is registered on our website, having the details of the kinds of positions that we're looking for and the kind of help we need. So if you can help us in any way, we really appreciate it. The next My Bill is coming up in a week on the 29th of May. Moderator is Chris Course. Chris, you want to talk about this a little bit?
Sure, Jim. Let's see. For the My Build, one thing I would suggest doing is drop me an email or send me a message in the chat. What I would like to do, and I will put my email in the chat. What I would like to do is get the photos in advance if you can, even up to the day of is great, as long as we get them ahead of time, because what I want to try to do is put them in a slideshow. And then that way, when it's your turn to talk about your model, all I have to do is pull up those pictures and you're good to go. And like I said, I'll put my email in the chat there for you. And keep in mind that also for those that built the Bar Mills 1 kit, there is a raffle. It is purely a raffle. There is no rhyme or reason to it other than we pick a name out of a hat. So it doesn't have to be the best thing in the planet. It doesn't have to be your best work or your worst work, or, somewhere in between, doesn't matter. Just as long as you get us a Bar Mills kit to show us, and we can enter you into that contest. And I think it's a $25 gift certificate at Bar Mills. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So I think that's about it. And I'll turn it back over to you, Jim.
Okay, and I also want to mention that the people that built along with Bob Farquhar, we're going to have a special section on the 29th for them to be able to show us the models that they built when they did the build along with Bob Farquhar. So both Gaylord and Randy's build along will be featured, and also Bob Farquhar's on the 29th. So we hope you can attend. And anybody that would like to show another model that weren't a part of the build-alongs, they're welcome too. So we're going to really have 3 segments of the My Bill for the 29th. One's open to everybody, and then the other 2 are just for Bob Farquhar's build-along and Gaylord and Randy's build-along with the Bar Mills kit. I'd also like to announce that on the 6th of June, or the 2nd of June, I'm sorry, Bill Davis is going to start a My Bill for his LaBelle kit, which is a closed vestibule baggage car. And during that same evening, Jamie Bothwell is going to do a short segment on passenger car underbody detail. He is a specialist in that, and I think it's going to be really interesting to have him talk about the underbody detail of passenger cars. At the same time, Bill Davis is building one of LaBelle's models. So LaBelle has offered a 25% discount on the kit. And if you haven't ordered it yet, I encourage you to do so. And as I say, it starts on the 2nd of June. We're also going to be starting a new segment of I've Got a Question. And we're interested in this because we think that a lot of people may have questions out there and just are hesitant to ask because we're talking about something else or somebody else is presenting or something. So we're going to have a special segment for this. And we hope that you'll go to our website. We have a form on the website that John's prepared for us, where you can just fill out your question. The form comes to me, and then I'll deal with the question on the next show. And hopefully one of the modelers present that evening can answer your question for you. Or if not, we'll look for somebody who can. And if it requires somebody to do a presentation, we'll look for that person. We've had one person that has sent in a question about airbrushing. And we've had two people on the show now. One is Clark Kooning, MMR, who's going to do a presentation on airbrushing later this year, after fishing season, he told me. And the other is Dave Silvernail, who has emailed the modeler and offered some advice once he gets some details of exactly what issues the modeler would like to talk about. So I think that your questions can get answered, and here's your opportunity to have some way to ask your questions without worrying about interfering with anybody else on the show. So with that said, now I'd like to turn to Ted Becker, who's filling in for Paul Thompson and talking with us about the quick tips for the evening. Ted, I really do appreciate this, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okie doke. Share the screen. Topic tonight is corralling KD HO knuckle springs. This may apply to other scales. I'm only familiar with HO. This is sort of an extension of my last tip, which involved needles. Although this time we're going to use the needles more conventionally with a piece of thread. And basically you thread the needle in the conventional way, and then you slip the needle and the thread through the KD spring, and then you remove the needle. So you have the spring captured on the thread. I would recommend maybe finding smoother thread than I have on hand. This particular length of thread resides in my little pack of needles for this purpose and has probably been used dozens of times for this purpose. So that may have contributed to the fuzziness. You get your KD coupler clamped in your third arm. And if you look just right, you'll notice there's this nice gap there between the knuckle and the frame. You take the needle off the thread, you use the typical threading technique of wetting the end of the thread and twirling it into a nice point and poking it through there. The needle may not fit through. If the needle fits, go ahead and use the needle, but my needle was a little too fat to go through there. You thread the thread through that hole. You lay the thread, the other end of the thread, along parallel to the coupler shank. You take a little tool, a tiny screwdriver or a needle, and you get the end of the spring under the little point that sticks out for it. I find it easier to do the knuckle first and then do the end on the body. And once you get both ends of the spring onto the little cones, then I hold my thumb against the spring and a finger on the other side, hold the spring in place and slide the thread out, and voila, your spring is back in place. And that is my tip although I am an advocate of clipping the gland hands off the KD couplers. If you're not using magnets, it saves a lot of trouble with low hanging couplers and the gland hand arms hanging up on switch frogs and things like that. And that does end my lesson for tonight.
Oh, I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much, Ted.
You're
Great
welcome.
info. And now I'd like to turn to something that I've been looking forward to for probably a couple of months now. And that's a presentation by Rick and Maureen Hunter of their build along of one of their Hutter line kits, a 30-foot King Truss bridge. And I really have, I think that you're really going to enjoy this. They normally take quite a while to do their clinics at shows that they attend. And they've been kind enough to break this one up into 30-minute segments. And it's going to take 8 of those segments for them to get through building it and weathering their bridge. So I hope that you'll follow along with them. I hope that you were able to get one of the kits and one of the scales that they offer it in. And I hope you enjoy this as much as I think you will. So Rick, Maureen, welcome, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi there.
I'm Rick Hunter, and this is my fantastic wife, Maureen. We own Hunterline from Cambridge, Ontario. What we're about to do is take you on a little journey from opening one of our kits to the finished product. And yes, it's going to take about 8 sessions of a half hour each. There's very many ways of building this kit, and we're going to have to deal with a time lapse for some people and not a time lapse for somebody else. We kind of hope that you will just bear with us on a lot of it so that you don't get ahead of what we're doing. We have done this clinic many times at conventions and so on across the country, but this is the first time we're going to do it virtually. So we have this issue where we have it all broken down into little segments, and we're going to try and get each segment done each week. And some people might do it a little quicker than others and so on, but we'll take it and see what happens. We want this to be not a lecture type thing. We want it to be a discussion. So if you have any questions, please butt in and let's talk about it. The King Post. The King Post is a neat structure. We're going to switch screens here and we'll just show you. Just take a second. There we go. These are our King Posts. Now, what makes a King Post a King Post? Well, we have to use a big one so it's easier to see. There we go. A King Post is based on the angle, which is probably the structure that will hold the most weight. We can get into tensions and compressions and all that stuff, but basically what you want to do is have something that's completely rigid so that when it goes across, it doesn't belly out. And the best way of doing that is to actually have this triangle come together like this, and the top of it butts together, and then it's sturdy. Now, what makes a King Post is there's a vertical rod in there. The very first ones did not have a vertical rod, they had a wooden rod. Okay, so you can actually tell the era of the bridge, whether it has a wooden truss or a single rod truss or a double rod, triple rod. I've seen them up to 4 rods before. As locomotives and so on got heavier, they just beefed them up, beefed them up, and beefed them up. One of the neat things about this type of design is that if you look at the stringers are all equal spaced. This is only true in a King Post and a Queen Post. back then they put them equal distance because they didn't know any better. It was only much later when they decided to group the stringers together right underneath the rail. So that is a more modern technology. And when I say that, I mean like 1840, 1850, somewhere in there. So these were notorious across all of North America. Any little ditch that they had to go over, a little stream, this is what they used because they didn't have the big ones at this time. Now, the original design was in Europe. If you turn it sideways again, and in Europe, it came down here like this. So this is where the V was, coming down like that. The V was not on top. And then when it came to North America, we have this problem here of flooding the rivers, and it would take that understructure and just destroy it. So they decided, okay, we'll put the structure up on top. And that's what you got there now today. So what we want to accomplish today is the preparation that you have to do for the wood. Okay, now this is distressing and maybe cutting, because each one of these kits can be made in a standard gauge or a narrow gauge. So if you're going to make it a narrow gauge, you will have to cut each one of the ties. So the ties that are pre-cut with it are actually a standard gauge. And that is a 16-foot wide. Maureen's just getting the drawing out here. The drawing is actually in two separate sections, 14-foot wide and a 16-foot wide. So you can see that this part here is a 14-foot clearance, and this is the 16-foot clearance. So we're going to do the S scale, and we're going to do it the 16-foot wide. So actually the 14-foot wide one is of no good for us to do this. So we're going to cut it off and put it aside because we don't need it. I know you don't want to destroy the drawing. Go for it. So this 14-foot one, while we have it here, this would be the length of the ties that you would need for narrow gauge. So if you decided on doing it in the narrow gauge, the ties all have to be this long. Okay, so that's going from there, from the inside line. Yep. So all those ties would have to be cut. I think I'll give you one or two extra ties in there in case you do goof. So the ties are all pre-cut, so they're all exactly the same. When you do this procedure, try and make them all the same. If you got a bigger scale, a chopper will not do it. The little scales, you could probably use a chopper. But this is going to be part of your homework probably, because what we're going to do today is we're going to distress all the wood. We're going to show you exactly what we do. And then if you need it narrow gauge, then you have to cut all your ties. So that's your homework for this week, is to cut those ties.
A question, Rick. So the rail is actually spiked directly onto the bridge?
Ties, yes. And just because you mentioned that, all our ties are actually a white pine as opposed to a basswood. The entire structure is basswood, but those ties are not, because commonly over the years they use sugar pine because it's a higher moisture content and it's less likely to split when you spike it. We have found the Mount Albert guys got together and they found out that white pine is just as moist as the sugar pine and it will not split. Let me rephrase that. Less likely to split. We hope everybody got their kits and their weathering mix. From our point of view, we got the message that they've all been delivered. So everybody who signed up should have it there ready to go.
So I'm gonna start distressing, right?
Okay, yep.
I use a fine tooth razor saw. This one is 42 teeth to an inch, but whatever you've got there that can distress the wood will work, a wire brush or the razor saw. And just make sure that you save all your packaging so that you can put all your wood back into the proper size and you don't get it mixed up. So what I do is I like to put it on a little cutting mat. I don't know if there's any really good reason to do that. I just don't like the sound of the razor saw on that bare wood. It's like fingernails on the chalkboard.
This is experience talking.
So I just take my razor saw, and with a fair amount of pressure, you want to see that grain be brought up, and you can, do little swirlies or just straight lines and do all sides of the wood.
Now, why do we distress the wood? Because this is all Mount Albert scale lumber, and it is just excellent. And here we're trying to mess it up. When you distress the wood like this, it puts a little valleys and little mountains on it, so that when you do the stain will soak in and it'll go to the trough and be darker, and the mountain of it will be lighter. So it gives each hunk of wood its own character when it gets stained.
It takes a little bit of time, but it certainly is well worth the effort.
This is the most boring thing of the entire kit, but it's the thing that makes it worthwhile for the end.
Maureen, is there any difference in what you're doing by scale? In other words, do you have to do it different for HO than O scale?
Yeah.
Um,
I think just being careful with the end scale for sure, because it's so much smaller. Not as much pressure, so you don't rip that wood. I would think that's it. And maybe if you're doing O scale, you might want to use a little wider razor saw. Do you think, Rick?
well, yeah, one time we had a fellow who builds a lot of our kits just to criticize them. He says, "Did you know when you distress the wood that it's not to scale?" And I said, "Okay, I don't need this information."
Craig Cassidy wants to know, can you group 3 or 4 times at a time? Or do you have
Yes,
to do it individually?
you can do it that way. You have more of a chance of missing one of the surfaces, because we do it on all 4 surfaces, so that when you view it, all sides look the same. On some of our kits, you can actually do one side, like planking, for example. You can do one side and the other side, and then when it comes time to installing it, you can look at it and say, okay, this side looks better than that side. So you can have the better side to view at.
So I'm assuming you're suggesting do all 4 sides of the tie of a single tie, not do 3 or 4 at the same time, and then sort of flip them that way.
You can, okay, but you have to be when you rotate it, you have to make sure that if you do them 4 at a time, that all 4 get rotated, and you're not going to miss one of the surfaces. We find that it doesn't take that much longer, but you're more assured that all 4 sides are going to get done.
All right.
And you just need to make sure you've got enough pressure there that you're putting that grain in. Sometimes, like I've seen people just kind of, put it across quite lightly, and it's well, you can see the grain a little bit, but I would put some good pressure on it. And some people will go over the same side a lot of times, but that's not necessary either. Just do it once. If you've got some good pressure there, it'll be enough.
We find some of the clinics that we give on this, somebody will sit on the same side and do it 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 times. And what you've done is you've decreased it by 2 scale inches. You just made it smaller, and you don't want it to be smaller.
It's pretty good too. The wood is really nice wood. When you do the distressing, you don't get a lot of fuzzies on the edge. If you do, you can just take a file or tweeze and pick off if there's a big hunk of wood that's hanging off of it, or just use a file and file it down a little bit to take it off. But I don't think I have any fuzzies here on these ties.
So we thank all the participants. We got everything out on time for everybody, even one person who came in late. We got that delivered, I think it was Friday afternoon it got delivered to his place. So this is good.
So I've got all the ties done. I'm just going to make sure I put them back in the bag.
So you remember, if you're going to do it narrow gauge, each one of those ties has to be cut to length.
And we can show you what we do to put the plan down on the board and put some wax paper over top, so you can cut those ties.
So we call this segment prepping.
To my next 6x10s. Let's do the same thing.
Now, there's many tools out there that you can do distressing with. We have one little tool that's a bunch of very stiff wires that come out, and you can extend them to any length you want for how flexible you want it. We find it does the job, but this seems to be quicker and easier and more consistent. Now, how do you do a long piece on such a little cutting board?
I just do half of it and turn it around. I think I need a new razor saw, Rick. It's getting flimsy on the end.
So we find when we're doing one of our big designs, since this is so boring, that you don't have to do them all at once, just do what the sub-assembly is that you're on. But a lot of people want to miss this step and maybe do it later. Well, maybe doing it later doesn't really cut it. Especially after it's assembled, it's really hard to groove it. Now, these are the stringers. I think there's 9 of them. I think there's 9, yeah. And if you're doing it in narrow gauge, you only use 7. If you're doing a ON30 and you're using S scale, make sure that you do the S scale at the full width, the full 16 feet in S scale. And it's great for ON30. We have actually done that for many years, using all of our kits for ON30. The S scale works. We coined the phrase spindlier. So it gives a spindlier look, which is great for narrow gauge. We have actually convinced Bachmann about this. The Bachmann ON30 traveling layout has got our S scale kits on it. It just looks so much better. We've convinced many, many people to do it that way. And it only works for S and ON30. If you look at the anime specs, the appearances are virtually the same. So because we're doing the S scale one here, this would be at the end, really work great for a 130. Now, if things are going right, all the fellows who have kits should be doing this with us.
It's hard when you can't talk to to them or hear back how they're doing.
I don't know if the people who have your kits want to identify themselves to say, you know, hey, they're here.
That would be nice.
I'm here and I'll be doing HON3.
That's great.
Who are you?
This is Chris Blackmar. I'm out of
Yes.
Green Valley,
Great.
Arizona.
Yes.
Oh, nice. That's great.
So that means you have to cut all those ties.
That's why God invented choppers.
Actually, we don't like using choppers because it actually crushes the fibers at the end of the wood. It's great for N scale and the smaller HO, but anything above that, we use the razor saw. It's just, we don't like that crushed look at the, on the.
Yeah, mine's going to be pretty well dilapidated, and so I'll be coming back with a file card and actually brushing the ends of it to try to rip them up a little bit and stuff.
That's great. At the Anna Marie National Convention, we always sponsor one of the contests room, and our criteria is wooden and a really good job in a kit or a scratch build. And back, I don't know, about 8-10 years ago, there was a little bridge there, and just like you said, all the ends were checked just absolutely great. So that was the deciding point for us that this was going to win our trophy that year. And it ended up, it was a 14-year-old girl who was just thrilled because she never won anything before. But the thing that sold us was all that checking at the end of each timber.
So I don't know how everybody's doing, how far they are. But I'm just going to show you what I do when I'm putting my plans down on the board and use wax paper, and then you can cut your ties right on the drawing, and wax paper kind of protects that drawing and also will allow you later on to glue right on top and not stick to the paper. So I usually just put the drawing down with some masking tape. And it's always a good idea too. I know the drawings, we have to fold them up because they're so big. Like you can even iron them out so you get them nice and flat.
Did you catch that little tip? You can actually iron them out.
I didn't, but you could.
Also, Craig Cassidy said he would is going to do his later on at the bench because I guess he's nowhere near his bench. And Horton Monroe on YouTube said he wasn't able to get on Zoom. So so you got at least 3 people that I know of.
He's actually a new fella to the hobby. Okay, and
Ed, if you'll have him send me an email, I'll send him a link right quick and he can get on.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah, Horton, if you want to send an email, if you look behind Jim and all that, you actually see his email address above the APMM ambassador setup.
You can see how she's putting the wax paper on.
Yeah, I've got the wax paper and I'm just using some masking tape to tape it down.
The best reason for using wax paper is it's translucent. You can actually see the drawing underneath, and glue doesn't stick to it. Like we had one fellow who didn't put the wax paper on, and he said, you know, the paper of the drawing stuck to his model.
So then anybody that's doing the narrow gauge, this is the 14-foot clearance, of course. So you're going to have to cut all your ties.
So that will be from this line.
Yeah.
To this line. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Where I need to stand up to have a look here. So I like to kind of stand over top, so I make sure I get it right on the edge of that. Just inside the, is that the guardrail, Rick? Is that what you call that?
Well, yeah, it's actually one of the braces.
One of the braces. So then get it started. I usually just get it started and then get my cutting mat. There.
I have a question for you guys.
Yep.
Why don't you guys use jigs? You're cutting
the
all
time-
these 14-foot pieces. A jig would give you the same length every single time. You just have to cut a cutting point marked out.
Yeah, you could do it for that, and like that's one of the things that are great about a chopper is you can repeat it. But you know, at this type of a design, they weren't that accurate. Okay, so if you have one tie, it's a little longer, a little shorter. It doesn't really matter for this design. In fact, it might look a little better if the ties weren't the same.
Yeah,
But we don't like to use jigs because by the time you put a jig together and get it here, we can have the model done. If you look at our trestle, it has 4 of the big bents on it. By the time you sit there and do a jig for it, we can have the bents done. If you know Al Collins from Automation, when he did our snow shed, he made just a simple little jig for it so they could put them all together. Well, see there you have 22 bents to do. So that gave him the incentive, okay, I'm going to make a little jig for this. But for just normal one time only, if you're going to make a lot of these, sure, make a jig. Just a simple little jig. Good question.
So I just used the tie that I cut exactly to what I want, and then just put it against one that I need to cut. Just make sure you always keep using the one that you started
The
with.
original, yeah.
Yeah. So this takes a little bit of time. And then I'll go back later and just take a little file if I need to, just to take off any burrs or anything.
Hey, Rick, wasn't one of your kids inspired the sander that Al eventually
Yeah,
built?
that was our snow shed. Yep. Because of all the angles, he looked at that and I forget what he counted all the angles. Okay, and there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. So that's why, yeah, that's what instigated him making the automation sander. Speaking of that, any of the registrants for this make along, Al's offering the sander to you at 10% off. But you have to show that you're a registrant. And at the end of this series, we're going to put all the people who are registered, we're going to put their name in a hat and actually draw one, and we're going to give them a $50 gift certificate for any of our products. So if you want kits or stains or whatever you want. But that's at the end. I think Jim wants us to have a wrap up where everybody shows what they've made, and that be good or bad or whatever. And then that's when we're going to pick the winner of the gift certificate.
Now, is
There's
that
no
including
plan.
repeater?
There's no question that everybody's going to do a fantastic job with Maureen showing us how to do it.
Well, I'll tell you a little story about that. See, when we're doing the clinics, I'm full of stories that of our experiences, and I'm been a national judge before, and at one of the conventions, somebody did our garden scale King Post Bridge, and it was the worst. I don't think you could call it a bridge. It was very badly done. And I hesitated judging it. So I went to the head judge and I said, I'm going to have a conflict of interest on this because it's so badly done. I don't think I can be partial on giving it a good mark. And so, okay. So I excuse myself. It's the worst monstrosity of a King's Bridge I've ever seen.
Oh, no.
And they put it into the contest.
Hey Jim, Horton just sent you an email for that Zoom conflict.
Horton, I just got it.
I don't know what our time is, but how much time we're at.
I don't know. Sorry, Jim, we're not keeping track of the time.
That's all right.
Getting there.
And Maureen, you're kind of coming out of the picture on, at least on
Oh,
my,
sorry. Okay. There we go.
In the package, can we get the rods?
Oh,
In the package, we find that people have this, we have this little package that has the rods in it, but it also has the drill bit in it. And people, for some reason, kind of throw that away. They might open it up with to keep the rods, and oh, I didn't get a drill bit. Yeah, the drill bit was there. The rods that we use are actually a phosphorus bronze. A lot of fellows use piano wire, brass. We find that they have their place, but the phosphorus bronze is very user-friendly. You can give it a little bend here and there and not worry about it springing back. It is a brassy color. And when we get to that, we'll actually show you the etching process that we use to make it black. That's one of the segments coming up.
Rick, can I ask a question? How many rods should be in the package?
There'll be 2 rods.
There should be 2 rods?
Well, there could be 1, and then you have to cut it in half,
Okay, got you. Thank you.
depending on scale. But that drill bit is about 2 or 3 thousandths of an inch bigger than what the rod is, so that it makes a good tight fit.
I've got all my ties cut. I'm just going back and just taking any little burrs off with the file.
Now, if you're any type of a modeler, you don't throw these little pieces away. They go somewhere. Never throw wood away.
I'm not.
Especially at these prices or current
Yeah.
prices.
Like last year, we put in 2, a medium-sized deck and a huge basketball deck in our backyard, all with pressure-treated wood. And nowadays, it's triple the price of what we were doing last year. I guess we had some forethought.
So what are we doing next week?
So next week, what we're going to do is we're going to start the staining process. So we need a little leftover dish, and you're going to have to decide which color you want as your base color, which is usually the lighter color. Like I think with most of them, it was the light brown. Black is the highlight color. We won't use that until the very last segment.
Unless you want a really dark bridge.
Yeah. These bridges exist today, not really for railroad use because they're much too light of a structure, but I know where a few of them are. A friend of mine actually lived on a rail line in Northern Ontario, and it's long abandoned, and here's this King Post Bridge that goes across his property, so he seek permission to use it for a vehicle bridge. So all he did was plank it. So it's actually an overkill for a vehicle, but yeah, hey, they're still there.
There, so they're all done.
A good example of a King Post Bridge is on the show Little House of the Prairie. When it starts every week the same way, all the girls are running across the bridge to school. And that is a King Post Bridge right there.
Now, you didn't say, I don't think you mentioned, or did you, that you should read the instructions first?
Oh yeah, that would help, you know.
But we know real men don't read instructions, right?
You got that right.
Yeah.
But yes, read over the history, read over the methods and techniques, and each one of the instructions. We try to be very not missing any steps. You have images along the entire process. We assume you know nothing in our instructions, so that they're simple enough that anybody should be able to follow. So if you think the tool list there somewhere too. So if you're missing some of the tools, you can maybe get them. I don't know if you can go to a hobby store, but we can't yet. But
Yeah, there's curbside pickup.
oh, curbside pickup. Okay.
Yeah. So I think just.
What is the pad that Maureen uses for her cutting? What is that little pad?
It's just a regular little cutting
just a
pad.
little cutting
You know the
pad.
big cutting pads? This is a little
Yeah.
one.
Ah, okay. I couldn't tell.
It's well worn.
It does have the ruler on there somewhere. And the grid patterns. That's the
Got it.
problem with our cutting pads is they seem to get wore out real quick. So Marine's showing the page that's in the of all the tools that you're going to be needing for this.
Yeah, it's page 7. And for next week, we're going to do the staining. So if you just have a disposable dish, a cheap brush, I usually have mine are out from the dollar store, and a pair of gloves would be great, and some paper towels. And I think for doing the staining, that's probably.
Yeah, if you have,
Oh, you need-
there's some that are signed up for N scale. The little sieve, this little sieve here, it's just a kitchen sieve. It's a lot easier to stain the N scale ties with that.
Yeah, I think that's.
So I think this brings us to the end of session 1. And so
Any questions? Any questions?
if you're doing narrow gauge and you haven't cut your ties, that's your homework. Get those ties cut for next Saturday.
I'm not doing narrow gauge, but I'll be doing my ties this week. I can't go downstairs right now because I just got a watchman installed. And I just got home from the hospital, so I'm going to be a few days behind.
Hey, no problem.
Okay.
We're confident that you can read the instructions and follow the instructions okay.
Well, the meat, what you did tonight is very forward. I took a few notes and everything. I just have a question. Automation, how is that the website or what?
Yeah, that's the name of the machine, and that's the name of the website too. Do we have it here?
Yeah.
Yeah, Maureen will just get it so you can see what it looks like. Like Al Collins, he's the originator of Mount Albert scale lumber, and
I was on the call.
and
Yeah, he's on the call if he wants to say hi.
Oh, okay. Are you on, Al? Maybe he's not hooked up.
It's in the chat already.
Oh, okay.
He's on mute talking. Al's on mute talking away and all that, and not showing everything off, but you can't hear him.
Okay, how's that?
That's
We hear
better.
you now.
That's better.
There's the
I hadn't planned on doing this, but since you're talking about cuts, I'm developing something new, which is revolutionary. Like if you look at, I don't know if you can see it or not, maybe not. Anyway, I'm bringing out a, I haven't got a name for it yet, but it's a chopper type tool, and it will cut 1/4 by 3/8 perfectly square. One side.
I'll be darned. When are you gonna come out with that, Al?
I got the prototype. It'll be a little while. Got to make some.
We haven't got it yet.
Oh, you'll be first. Don't worry.
Yes.
You'll be throwing away that razor saw, Maureen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that would be nice.
Hi, this is
Bad I
Mike.
can't.
I have a question for Al.
Shoot.
Okay, your repeater thing, is that supposed to be loose on that one bar?
This is the repeater.
Okay, explain to me what you mean by loose.
Okay, so you can lock it down, but the part that has the spring is really loose on the main shaft.
Oh, maybe maybe it's just backed off. It should have Loctite on the threads. Just tighten it, if you got a little Loctite on the threads and screw it back in.
Okay.
Is that what you're talking about, the rod that it slides back and forth on?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's just come loose.
Okay, I didn't know that those were adjustable.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I'm not sure. Yeah. I don't know.
Any other questions?
When you're gonna be using this, Rick, during your presentation, you and Maureen, right? You're gonna be
Well,
using it.
This particular design only has a couple angles on it where the triangles come together. So we're going to be using it a little bit. It's not like our snow shed that has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of angles on it. It's only got a few angles.
Okay.
So we're going to set it up to use it for that too.
Okay.
All right, your second screen is just showing the Ultimates and Sander. It's not showing what Maureen's doing.
Oh, she's not doing anything yet.
Oh, well, that would explain
We're just
why.
showing the sander. Since we're talking about the sander, she put the sander up so that you can see what we're looking at.
I'm done.
You're done. See how quick it was?
Oh, okay.
I
That
got all
explains why we're confused.
all the lumber's distressed and my ties are cut. They're cut to the 14-foot length.
Anybody have any more questions for Rick or Maureen?
I got a quick one. Rick, would you happen to have a list of all the build-alongs you're going to do? I'm the webmaster for the site, so I was going to put them up and fill them in as we go.
It's the next. He'll be doing this one. He'll be doing 7 more on Saturday nights.
Yes.
If you have that, could send that to me to the webmaster. I'd appreciate that.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I think that may be it tonight. Thank you both so very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
See you next
Look forward
week.
to the next one. All right.
See you next week.
And now we're going to go to John Frankfurter, who's going to talk about building his S-scale bridge, scratch building his S-scale bridge. So John, welcome. I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Well, this is a quick recap from what we talked about last week. Unfortunately, two of my previous videos haven't made it up on YouTube yet, but this is the final segment of my build along. Last week we looked at building the deck for the bridge. We looked at gluing up the cross members, the paint. We looked at the pictures of the internal bridge structure. I made a little name tag that goes in the center of the bridge that basically says the name of the bridge and who built it and when. We had a look at the bridge in place. And then after that, we had some discussions about laser cutting, model building in general. So this is another look at the bridge that it's temporarily in place. After I designed it and built it, I realized that I forgot the cross members that go from on each side. So that'll be added later on. So this is the gorge that Randy Bosher helped me carve out and design. This is where I cut out the foam for the piers on both sides. And then I designed the pier on my CNC machine and cut these out. Now Randy gave me this sort of a green colored paint, and that kind of reminds me of the overpasses on the highways where they paint the bridge kind of that color. So I use that as my pier bridges. And here's where I have them glued in place. These piers are for my other bridge that I built. And then I used, Randy told me about this stuff called ground goop, and I used that to cover the styrofoam to give it more of a rocky or dirt covered look to my foam. And here's the, I put a handrail on the one side of the bridge, and you'll notice right here that this particular section is not the same as the rest of them. Evidently, when I was measuring this out, the board I was using was longer than my deck span, so I miscalculated for the spacing there. But I used a number 28 solid wire with the yellow jacket on it. I guess that's the OSHA rules for bridges. Since the bridge set up just a little bit off the actual table, I made some steps and continued the number 28 handrail wire down here. I used the 1/8 inch balsa wood strips, and I used a mahogany stain in it. It looks pretty close to railroad ties. It doesn't match these ties, but that's okay. So here's a picture of the two bridges that I built. This is John the builder. He's out there checking everything out to make sure that the bridge was designed right. So that's basically the simple bridge build along. If we ever get the other two videos up on YouTube, you can see where I cut these simulated boards and some of the cutouts or the side cutouts for the bridge. I did that on my laser, and so far I think it's turned out pretty good. Now this bridge right here, that's all scratch built. There's no laser cutting on that or anything. And what I did with that one was I I found a site online that shows how to design a curved bridge using this style of bridge. So in finishing this up, I think I just need to go back in and put the cross braces. And here's a picture of the bridge and the gorge from the other side. Now I got this masonite in here, and what I'm going to do is, Randy said he would come over when he gets done with his knee surgery and stuff, that I'm going to put another piece on the other end, and then we're going to fill this in and make it into like a small stream. But I've used some weeds I found out along the railroad to make trees and stuff. My grandson thought it was funny to put animals in there to fill in the scene. There's a guy standing behind the tree, and I think there's 4 or 5 snakes down in there. And the snakes is kind of neat because Randy said that you could use real thin solder, and you just flatten one end a little bit to make it look like the snake's head, and then you just kind of, between your fingers, you just kind of roll up like they would be curled up. And there's little nooks and crannies down in here where I've got snakes hidden. There's a big rock down here that there's a guy sitting on that, and this section turned into be a landslide. Oops. So let's see. Yeah, this turned into be a landslide. So Randy's been teaching me how the ways to make the rocks and stuff, and how to use the foliage to make it fill in. But I think these 2 bridges, even though they're not built as a kit or anything like that, I personally think they turned out pretty good. I've cut everything and put the pillars in so that it has plenty of support, and that's it. I think it turned out pretty nice, even though I might have forgot a few things here and there. But all in all, this down here, I thought that was kind of neat. I bought some really cheap brushes. I think they were like 25 cents at the store. I mean, they're really coarse brushes, and I basically just pulled the bristles out and glued them into place. So that's it for me, and thanks for following along. Any questions or comments? I'm always open to learn something new, so thanks for watching.
Well, John, I certainly appreciate everything that you've done to show us what you did to build the bridges. I really do appreciate it. And it just goes to show that you don't have to buy a kit necessarily. If you see something that you want to build, it's possible to strike out and give it a shot and build it. And I admire you for doing that. And I think your bridges turned out beautiful. I really do.
Thank you.
So does anybody have any more questions for John?
What have you learned the most by doing this?
When I built the second bridge, I learned a lot of structure, because the first bridge was just I needed a bridge because my grandson wanted to run trains across the gorge. And so that was just a quick and dirty, throw it together, and it was a bridge. The problem with that one is actually the decking is what supports the train going across there. Now with the second bridge, I learned a little bit more about the design of the bridge, and I looked at diagrams and how they actually build a curved bridge like that. So, as I progress along in my modeling skills, I'm learning a little bit more so that it doesn't look like it was cut out of a laser and thrown together like the first one. But, you got to start someplace.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, and frankly, what John just said is exactly the purpose of the series of Watch Me Build that John's a part of, because it doesn't, you don't have to be a master craftsman here. what we want to see is what you're building and what issues you're dealing with and what you're learning. As Ed asked the question, what did you learn from this? And that's the important part of it. And we love to see what you're building and how you're building it and the techniques that you're using. And that's why we started this segment. So John, being the guinea pig and the first one to do it, I really do appreciate it. And thanks again for your time and effort.
Thank you.
Well, we don't have a featured modeler tonight as that person had a conflict. So that's really our show this evening. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Our next meetup is going to be Wednesday, the 26th of May. Scott Thornton is going to be back showing his throttle and actually using it to run his railroad. Martin Breckbill is going to be here for Scratch Building a Car. Greg Cassidy is going to do what's new from the manufacturers. And of course, Paul Thompson should be back by then to do his quick tips. So thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to go to our website and register so that you'll get notices on all the future shows. And I hope you've enjoyed tonight and hope you've learned something, and happy modeling to you. And Ed,